Because Alan Shearer's celebration is the worst I've ever seen.
Well, you've seen it 422 times.
So listen to this. When Sherer left Blackburn for Newcastle, he became the most expensive player in history, 20 million euros. Translate that to today's money, that's 266 million, which is funny because Blackburn's owner Jack Walker hated Man United so much, he rejected a 27 million euro bid from them. Today, that would be 359 million for a player that so many love to pretend was just a poacher. Look, the great Batistuta said it best, Sherer is the greatest. Once I sat talking to Del Piero, he could not say one bad word about him. He told me Juve's defenders were terrified of him, that Lippi was fascinated by him, that he, Trezeguet and Marcelo Salas were made to watch hours upon hours of footage from his games. The very best of the best learned everything from studying how he played. And yet, ask any kid now what they think of Sherer and they'll look you in the eye and tell you that a guy who's still to this day the Premier League's all-time top scorer, despite doing his ACL 3 different times, rejecting every top club in the world to instead win the league with goddamn Blackburn, and then sacrificing everything to join his childhood club in his prime, is boring. Man, let me tell you, from the first time Sherer touched a football, it was anything but boring. On this guy's first ever start, still back at Southampton, he went up against an Arsenal side with one of the strongest backlines in the country and immediately got his first hat-trick. He was 17 years old, to this day the youngest in the history of English football. And the worst part is that back then, he wasn't even really a striker. He had come up the academy as a midfielder, but no matter what, after 3 years getting slowly introduced into the first team, he was called up to the Toulon tournament with the England under-21s and put down 7 goals in 4 matches, scoring the only goal in the final against Zidane's France and sweeping every award, then coming back to Southampton, getting 18 goals for the season and scoring in damn near every round of the League Cup, somehow dragging them to the final, even though the team as a whole would finish the season with fewer goals than games played. Add to that the fact that he brought down France again with a goal and assist on his proper England debut, and by summer, as one newspaper wrote, Ian Brandfoot was the most popular manager in the country. But even though that phone rang non-stop, with Sir Alex Ferguson being especially desperate to make him his new star striker, he ended up having to settle for Cantona, as for some reason when recently promoted Blackburn Rovers reached out to Sherer with their plan to win the Premier League in 4 years, he just couldn't say no. So by the time the next season started, a 21-year-old had landed at Ewood Park as the most expensive player in the history of English football. Right on his first game, he went in with 2 screamers to turn the match around, the first a 30-yard volley, the second a 30-yard shot, and as the commentator claimed, Sherer was already repaying his fee. He could not imagine that 11 games later, he'd already be on 12 goals and 4 assists, with chips from outside the box, volleys on the half-turn, you name it. All so that a couple months later, as he was about to come off a match against Leeds with 2 more goals to add to his tally, his ACL snapped and Sherer was out for the season. 231 days later, after watching as Blackburn dropped to 4th on the table, allowing United to leapfrog them straight to the title, man, Sherer came back, played a handful of matches as a sub, and right from the moment they put him on the starting 11, well, in those first 8 starts, Blackburn Rovers scored 12 goals in total. 11 of those were scored by Alan Shearer, and the other, he assisted it. Yeah, this guy was superhuman. It was unbelievable to see a player coming off of such an injury being just as capable of repeatedly showing up in time to tap it in as he was of pulling off an acrobatic finish or even dribbling past the keeper. And as you may imagine, even if his teammates started scoring some themselves from there on out, he never really slowed down. By the end of the season, he was on 31 league goals, meanwhile Blackburn as a team was on 84 points. Only twice over the previous 21 years had someone scored more than Sherer in seemingly any other year. That tally would have made Blackburn champions, but on that specific season, even if he did take the Afterly Waste Player of the Year award, neither was enough. And as Sherer said it himself, first is first, second and third are nowhere. So the only alternative was to charge at Man United once more, and thankfully this time, it would have helped. The next season, Chris Sutton arrived in Blackburn as the £5 million man, the new British transfer record, and the two quickly became one of the greatest duos in football history. Known as the SAS, they'd opened the league with 33 goals and 16 assists between the two in just the first 24 matches, with Sherer scoring 3 hat-tricks in 3 consecutive months as they sent Blackburn straight to the top of the table, where, strangely enough, the real problems would start. It's not exactly easy to figure out why, but after 36 nearly perfect matches from Blackburn, as they set 8 points clear of United, everything began to crumble as Sherer desperately tried to stop them from choking the title. Against City, he scored, yet they lost 3-2. The next game, he assisted the winner as they barely made it past Crystal Palace. Then, in the second to last match, he scored their only goal, and out of nowhere, what once had been a comfortable lead, now had them facing Liverpool for the league's final day, needing a victory in order to bring home any silverware. And though 20 minutes in, again, Sherer opened the scoring as the commentator shouted that this was the biggest game Blackburn had ever played. Then John Barnes tied the match, and JD Redknapp on the final minute of the final game sent in the free kick that lost Blackburn the match. And as all the way over in Upton Park, the ball danced over the goal line, in Shearer's own words, I can only remember everyone's faces. I looked at the stands and thought, we've thrown the league away. But then, euphoria. West Ham held Man United to a draw, and by a single point, their 4-year plan had been cut short. Blackburn Rovers were already English champions the moment the final whistle was sounded. They are still the only ever town club to win a Premier League title, and they did it in such dramatic fashion that, as the commentator said, you must feel that the truth is sometimes stranger than fiction. And as for Sherer, not only was he the league's top scorer, tying a goal-scoring record that would last 28 years, he was just 2 assists shy of being the league's top provider, totaling 47 goal contributions in the league alone, averaging 1 every 79 minutes on the pitch, and more than rightfully being named the PFA Player of the Year. Still, just as the celebrations began winding down, it was very clear that Shearer's only goal was to try to retain the title, to cement Blackburn as one of the top clubs in England. But instead, it seemed everyone else was satisfied with winning it once. Mere days later, Kenny Dalglish shocked everyone by resigning as manager, and Jack Walker, their millionaire owner, began refusing to make new signings, insisting that instead, they should give the old players a shot at proving their worth. And in the end, I think it was the club's chairman who said it best. We won the league a year too early. In the middle of all this mess, the dressing room descended into absolute chaos. 5 games into their Champions League campaign, and still without a win, they had players literally getting into fist fights in the middle of the pitch. And again, the only light at the end of the tunnel was Sherer, who kept scoring like nothing was going on. 23 goal contributions in the 20 matches he played before New Year's, and somehow he was being nominated to the Ballon d'Or no matter what. By the end, even with Blackburn in 7th and Sherer being forced to sign off 3 games early in order to recover from an injury in time for the Euros, he was still the Premier League's top scorer once more, though apparently that wasn't enough to convince some. Prior to that year's tournament, Sherer had gone 12 matches without scoring for England, which, added to that injury, meant most did not think he should have even been called up. But regardless, Terry Venables told him, whatever happens, you will be my number 9, up front from the very first game. And even with all the media pressure in the world mounted on his shoulders, 22 minutes into that game, he had already scored. And in the one after that, he had done the same. By the third, against anyone's expectations, he put on a brace against the Netherlands squad that seemed unbeatable on paper. Then, after a goalless draw against Spain in the shootout, he converted his penalty to put them in the semis, where it only took him 3 minutes to find the net, though we'd end up watching as the Germans equalized, as Gascoigne got within inches of giving them the win, and as, this time, converting his own penalty just wasn't enough. 5 goals in 5 matches, and nothing to show for it, aside from a place in the team of the tournament and a golden boot. Regardless, with a tournament like that on top of 2 of the most impressive goal-scoring seasons in modern history, there was one thing that was guaranteed. There wasn't a single club in Europe would say no to Alan Shearer, and as much as Blackburn didn't want to let go of him, I mean, Jack Walker literally had the portrait of the man hanging on his office wall, even went as far as offering him the chance to become a player manager at 25. There was nothing they could do to keep him. The only thing working in their favor the moment Real Madrid, Juventus and Barcelona came in with an offer was that Shearer's his wife had made him promise not to leave England, but well, that opened the way for Man United, which left Walker furious. He watched powerless as Sherer visited Sir Alex's home, as the number 9 shirt was left vacant for him, as a passenger under the name A. Sherer was registered for United's flight to Milan, and as they matched every valuation that was sent their way, no matter how outrageous. By the final day of the transfer saga, Shearer's name was already being printed in red across every newspaper in the country, but before the pen was put to paper, Shearer's childhood idol Kevin Keegan, now the manager of his childhood club Newcastle, got him to come down for a last-minute meeting, begged him to dedicate his best years to the club of his heart, and by night, Sir Alex would refuse to even pick up the phone, afraid of what news Sherer would have for him on the other side of the line. That same week, Walker gave up on an extra $7 million just so that Sherer wouldn't sign for his sworn rivals, and suddenly, the man would be standing on a stage in front of St. James Park as 20,000 gathered in disbelief to welcome back their son, now the man many called the best striker on the planet. It's hard to put into words the kind of hope a signing like this brought to the city. With Ginola, Spila and Les Ferdinand already in the squad, Newcastle had finished second just the previous year, and with a miracle man like Sherer in the squad, plenty believed he could repeat what he had done at Blackburn, and it surely didn't help that after a month or so, Sherer clicked into gear, forming a tremendous partnership with Ferdinand that quickly saw them demolish that Man United squad 5-0, with Sherer taking the man of the match with a goal and 2 assists, carrying that form into a streak of 15 goals and 5 assists in 17 matches that saw him rise up to the podium of the Ballon d'Or by New Year's, even if he'd refused to show up to the after party, claiming that no one is interested in coming third. But if he needed a reason not to celebrate, he'd surely get one soon. Overnight, Kevin Keegan just disappeared. As Sherer himself said, there was no sign of him, no one knew why he left. Regardless, with many theorizing that the pressure had gotten to him, since after all, he had choked a 12-point lead just a year before and was now sitting at a disappointing 6th place in the table, the club quickly looked for a replacement, and to Shearer's luck, his old Blackburn manager Kenny Dalglish was the one who popped up, quickly flipping the team's form. I mean, Sherer did not lose even one more league game after that, and had it not been for 2 defeats and a draw while he was out with a groin injury, the title would have been theirs. Add to that a 3rd year in a row at the top of the goal-scoring charts and a 2nd PFA Player of the Year award, and if there was hope before, now there was an undying belief. But that 2nd season not only saw the departure of Les Ferdinand, again stopping Sherer from holding on to his striking partner for more than a year, but then, still in pre-season, Shearer's knee gave out for a 2nd time. 191 days out, by the time he came back, Dalglish was already bound to get the sack. It was all back to square zero. A late run with 5 goals in 5 matches still allowed Sherer to astonishingly carry them to an FA Cup final, but with luck having it at Newcastle couldn't do anything but hit the post repeatedly. Defeat was the only thing waiting for him there. And even if, over summer, Sherer would finally get to play at a World Cup, now carrying the captain's armband, his goal against Argentina meant nothing once David Beckham was shown that infamous red card, and things were only about to get worse. Back at Newcastle, Ruud Gullit would be the new manager, and to put it lightly, Sherer and him did not get along. And no matter if that season he would become the quickest player in history to reach 150 Premier League goals, or if he'd somehow pull off 5 more goals in 5 more matches to lead Newcastle to another FA Cup final they'd ultimately lose, by the next year, their relationship was already doomed. After 6 defeats in the opening 6 matches, Gullit told Sherer to his face that he was the most overrated player he had ever seen before dropping him to the bench. And so, the following morning, Sherer went up to his office planning to announce that it was one or the other, that either Gullit stepped down or he'd leave Newcastle, but instead, he opened the door to an empty office. Gullit had already gotten the sack, and ironically, with Bobby Robson finally getting his man after repeatedly trying to convince him to join Barcelona, the result turned out to be one of the biggest middle fingers ever shown in football. On Robson's very first match in charge, Sherer did not score 1, 2 or even 3 goals. He scored 5 and even made sure to assist 1 more, instantly going on a run of 10 goals in 5 matches, damn near instantly pulling Newcastle back up from the relegation zone, though, as good as that season turned out for him, things would turn sour again. After a disappointing Euros, Sherer decided to retire from the national team to focus on club football, only to yet again go through a devastatingly injury-riddled season that saw him make only 2 appearances across 8 months. But as many began insisting it was maybe time for him to hang his boots and put an end to his misery instead, Sherer bounced back, quickly made another challenge for the Golden Boot, somehow finishing only 1 goal short of a 24-year-old Henry and getting Newcastle into the Champions League spots. Then opening the next season with a screamer against Everton that got Sir Alex himself, as bitter as he may have been, to claim that Sherer hit it like he meant to kill it, before following it up with 6 goals in the group stages to lead them to wins over Juventus and Bayer Leverkusen, as well as a draw away at the San Siro, before rejecting any rumors of a possible comeback for the 2002 World Cup and letting out one final hurrah over the next 2 seasons. First scoring 6 in 7 UEFA Cup matches to lead Newcastle to the semi-finals, then going even harder despite announcing that he'd be retiring at the end of the following season, taking 12 goals in 8 matches, shocking everyone by finishing as a UEFA Cup top scorer at 34 years of age, even as his club could not get past the quarters, which was enough for manager Graham Souness to convince him to back down and play for 1 more year so that he'd become the club's all-time top scorer though. Unfortunately, it ended up snapping his knee one final time, closing things up by hitting back at anyone who insisted that a career with only 1 trophy had been a waste, saying that I lived a dream, wearing the number 9 and scoring goals for the club that I love. I got the record, I got the statue. How could I regret that? When I look back, there's no part of me thinking I should have done anything differently. I just sit there and think, how lucky was I?